If we had achieved the full vision of the web, then I wouldn't really need to be giving this lecture. Even so, with HTML5, we are progressing very well in the direction towards providing accessibility for all. And if you'd followed all the lectures in the last 3 chapters, then you're well on the way to providing accessibility for all. But I want to emphasize one or two other techniques which can help improve accessibility. The importance of this is not to think about special cases, but to think about universality. That what we want to do is to put into our website techniques which assist navigation around the site, which assist understanding of the content of the site, no matter what the situation is of the person who's watching it, or viewing it, or accessing it. And in many ways, one wants to just get away from the concept of text-based modalities, mouse-based modalities, and say, well, what are the universal modalities for accessing content? How do we support those if someone's using an agent to act on their behalf? How do we enable that agent to navigate around and access the content? And remember, this is about access for all. So the web is a universal phenomenon, and if you do start on the route or continue on the route, which I'm going to point you towards in this lecture, then we will all benefit. So the first thing to do is something which I've actually pointed out in earlier lectures. The template I gave you has a title in the head element, and don't be lax on that. Make sure that all web pages have a descriptive title. We've seen this web page before, but it gives a good example of the approach to providing all the web pages with a title. So use the name of the domain that you're looking at, and use some separator. I mentioned using the pipe as an example here. We've used a semicolon preference of that particular organization, and as we navigate around, then you'll see that the individual pages are clearly identified as subpages of the parent domain. The next thing to do, that previous website didn't have them, but for any complex website, then add in what are called breadcrumb trails, something that will identify where the user is in relation to the rest of the content in the page. So this assists navigation, helps someone identify the current location within the site structure. If the breadcrumbs are done properly, then it'll enable someone to quickly backtrack to key points which they may want to move back to. And if they're watching that, it'll also help them visualize the content structure of the page, and so that may help them in future when they hopefully come back to the web page and look again. I'll give you 2 examples of that this time. Here's a well-known UK retail outlet, and on their web page you see here a breadcrumb trail using the greater than sign as a separator. But again, it gives you a very clear indication of where you are with respect to the home page, that you're in a particular sub-page of the toy department, and I can easily go back to the toy department and navigate forwards again through to different subsections within that, should I wish to, and then I can easily go back to the top level page. Contrast to this one, which I still personally find not quite satisfactory. What we can do here in this particular one is to navigate. This is as you can see, a university website. I can navigate to faculties, and from the faculties I can navigate to departments. This is my department. But you see here the breadcrumb trail does not fully respect the organization of the website, because all I've got here is something which says the Department of Computing is a subdomain of home, the University of Surrey. And if I was visiting the site and I wanted to understand about the faculty and visit different departments or research groups within the faculty, I've got a rather irritating thing, because if I'm using this, then if I want to use the breadcrumb trail to navigate, all I can do is go back to the parent, the root, sorry, and go back into the faculty and then explore a different department. And even as a member of the university, I find this faintly irritating. It's perhaps a slight improvement on not having the breadcrumb trail at all, but do think carefully about the breadcrumb trail. It should respect the structure of the website, but to be intuitive to the users of the website, it also needs to respect the organizational structure, the physical organizational structure of the organization which they are exploring through the website. Moving on a little bit further, there are things you can do to assist someone's navigation. Again, this is going back to what I was saying earlier about thinking about different modalities of interacting with your website. So the standard one, as I've been doing, is to navigate around using mouse and clicks, but there are those that would prefer just to use the keyboard or only have the keyboard available, or they might have some assistive technology which primarily gives them access to the keyboard, either through some mechanical device or through some auditory device, and you can help them by doing that. And not only for those that maybe have a disability where they've got some assistance, but also for the power users of your website, this can be advantageous. So what I've done here is to put into a form. You've seen this form before, but I've added in tab indexes. So what this is going to enable a user to do now is to navigate through the form simply by pressing tabs to go from one input field to another input field, and then finally to the submit button without using a mouse. Do understand that perfectly normal, rational people don't like using mice and are much more comfortable navigating around quickly using the keyboard. So it's going to benefit them too, but for anybody else who has some assistance to help them navigate around a website, then this is an extremely valuable thing to add into forms. If you're going to try this out for yourself, remember that your browser may need to have the preferences set to support the tabbing around fields within a window, and then try it out. So let's just take a very quick look at this. So here's the same form presented, and now in order to navigate around this, I don't need to use the mouse. If I press the tab, it'll highlight the fields and I can type stuff in and submit without moving my fingers from the keyboard. Or as I said, if I need to use some assistive technology, the technology can easily navigate around the form on my behalf, and it knows the sequence to enter details. Yeah. So again, a quick reminder of the form. I've added in tab indexes, and you can add those to a range of all the input elements and a number of other elements to assist the user in navigating around the site. You can also use further assistance. One thing which is possible, but I would caution against it, is to add in keyboard shortcuts. The problem with that is if you want to do that without causing any problems, then you need to know what other keyboard shortcuts someone maybe has already set up on their computer in order to assist their navigation around the computer, and you simply don't know that. So the chances are you may well get clashes if you start to embed keyboard shortcuts into your website. So tabbing is fine. If the window's got focus, then the tab will navigate around the website. So I would strongly recommend focusing just on the tabbing. There is another technique which is often recommended. My feeling again is that its need is gradually being reduced by HTML5 and evolutions of HTML, as HTML contains more semantic content, but these ARIA roles, ARIA for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, can still be useful in terms of providing extra detail. But some of the things such as menus, navigations and so forth as role names which are attached as attributes to elements are not necessary anymore, because they're essentially covered by the new semantic elements of HTML5. But here's an example where one of the ARIA roles can be useful for any assistive technology. If you remember back to the lecture on structuring documents, we can have several headers in a document. Here we've got some nesting of headers. Any article or section can also have a header, as well as the main page. So what I've done here is to give the parent header, the main banner for the page, the role of banner, and that's typically something where you have a header which will be consistent across all of the subpages in your website, and so that's declared with that role, and the assistive technology will know then that as it moves from page to page within a website, it doesn't need to repeat the content of that header. Go to that website indicated there and you'll see some other roles, and you may well find a number of those still useful in your particular website to set up your HTML so that it does effectively support any assistive technology. One or two other things to remember, some simple guidelines. When you add in an image into your page with an ID and the reference to the image file, do also include an alternative textual representation of the content of the image. Again, for any assistive technology, it will read out that or present that to the user in some way, but it can also be useful if there is a delay in downloading the image file. So that additional attribute, if you keep in mind a template, then make sure that for all of your images, include that attribute with some useful description of the content of the image. So if the image is not viewable by somebody, then there is an alternative representation of that which can describe what they should have, the impression they should have got from that image. And a final one to keep in mind, and this is really a general purpose accessibility benefit for all users, and that is a good practice or best recommended practice with abbreviations is, even on the first occurrence of your website, don't spell the abbreviation out, because what you hope is that the viewers of your website will come back time and again and they will get familiar with those abbreviations and they don't need to see that text spelled out. So use the abbreviation element with a title which spells out the abbreviation. So here we've got for UK readers, some of them will be familiar with the designation of a site of special scientific interest for a natural history area which has got some specific high value. For non-technical people, SSSI will not be familiar on the first reading, but if they keep coming back to the website, they won't want to see site of special scientific interest spelled out in full each time. Furthermore, if you continue to use that abbreviation throughout your website, at each point, then if you include that element around the abbreviation, then if someone has forgotten temporarily the meaning of that, then they can do this. We've seen this example before, but now I've added a little bit of text to the Friends of Box Hill, and here we've got that abbreviation SSSI, and if I hover my mouse over it, then it will spell out what it means for me. So if that's the first time I come to it, then all I need to do is hover the mouse over it. If I'm reading the document deeper down into the document and I've forgotten what SSSI means, then again I just need to hover the mouse over it and it'll pop up. And if I'm familiar with this, then I can glance through that and it doesn't get irritating having the full version of that spelled out for me each time I look at the page. And finally, just a few other things to think about for the moment. Include a sitemap for a complex site, possibly a table of contents. You might also include on the home page a help link which someone can click on to get a little bit of advice about the content and the navigation modalities. Include a search function on any large site. Things to keep in mind, and there are other things which in courses on style sheets and on JavaScript need to be included, which again can improve or assist accessibility for all. So just to summarize, HTML5 is a very positive move forward for accessibility. It's moving the web in the right direction. But even so, at this stage, there are some other things which you can think about, even when it comes to just using HTML. More importantly, to continue to keep accessibility in mind as you start to learn about style sheets and as you start to use some of the dynamic functionalities in JavaScript. Both of those can be used to improve accessibility for all. And if you do that, of course, the message I gave you before, it's all about building a global community.